All right. Well, we got a great cadre here today, guys. Remember, this is our workshop style class. I know we're in this one. We normally do it just regular Zoom versus the webinar version. So it might be a little bit weird versus asking your questions directly like we normally do. So apologies for that, because we normally like to see all your faces. Uh, I'm super excited for this, Lisa. This is like a special treat for me. There's a few reasons. I'll give a little bit of intro of why I'm so excited about this. But it's extra special because I've known Lisa a long time now. Lisa is a journalist. I think of her as one of the journalists. I've been fortunate to work with many journalists in my career. She is absolutely at the top of my list for highest integrity. She's also reported on many things that I've been very, very close to. And her writing always manages to give me a unique perspective. When you're in the thick of it, you think you know all the sides, and it's always very helpful to see someone who uncovers and brings all the pieces together, and it helps you even understand the issue set at a deeper level. And so that is something I really appreciate about her. Second, she's a journalist in the thick of it, like in the thick of the thick. She's in technology, dealing with the policies that are going on around different technologies, AI, other type things. A lot of that's going on in the government. She tackles some of the biggest issues with the biggest companies that are out there. So much so that I have it set up on my system that whenever she publishes something from the Washington Post, it alerts me right away when she posts something because I'm like, oh, now I need to read something. And then third, she just won the highest honor in journalism, the Pulitzer Prize. From her alma mater as well, which has got to be epically cool thing to do. Kind of having been if you've been a student there and you're walking through this thing and thinking like, one day could I ever get there? That is to be extra special. And we actually haven't talked since you got the Pulitzer, other than texting back and forth. So this is extra cool about this. Her Pulitzer Prize work on Doge and her thinking about how they impact on government with these technologies, all the different things there. And we're going to talk to her more about that. And then finally, the cool thing about this is I get to turn the tables for one of my last big public interviews in the government. It was with our guest, and so that is extra cool for me that I get to turn the tables because she's become such a force of nature. So thank you for being here with us, Lisa.
Thank you so much. I do remember that interview because you had a skateboard in the White House. May have been
It's
skateboarding in the White House.
That is true. It is true. One of two people that have officially skateboarded in the White House, me and Tony Hawk, are the only two that we are aware of that have done that. I am not putting myself anywhere in the same league as Tony. Just to be clear, I am nowhere that good. Uh, so, Lisa, maybe the place I want to start with here is, the component, which is we've talked a bunch to as we've talked interacted on this program with people, is both the kind of journalism and storytelling. And, like what does that mean even these days when we hear these words? Because we see the space being completely in flux. We've got people like you who are at some of the most preeminent institution. And then we've got the influencer world that is also reporting on news. We kind of had in-betweens with the bloggers and the blogosphere and all of these layers. So maybe just to help ground us especially for those people who are here, not from a traditional background of journalism or considering going into journalism, what is journalism to you? How should we think about it?
Sure. Well, yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to do this, DJ. You're also one of the people I respect most and for the longest time out here in the Valley. And I did get to go see you in Washington, D.C. in the White House. And when I saw you with the skateboard, I thought, okay, he's cool. I want to get to know this guy better. And it's always oftentimes little details like that sometimes do draw you to people, right?
Mhm.
Um, what I'd say is, I was thinking about this question and I was thinking, journalism to me is still a story that makes you see your world differently. It's collects what people are doing in one corner of the world and brings it to another corner of the world, or to a lot of people in a different corner. And that's an empathy exercise. And sometimes that sensitizes you to who in your community or outside of your community is being hurt by actions or behaviors that you weren't aware of. So I think it's at its core, it's a sensitization and empathy exercise. Think it's also still about unpacking how does power work. And we use this word a lot at the Washington Post: accountability. Who's accountable for the effects of power, and who is impacting it, who is impacted, and what's happening behind the scenes. So to me, this kind of journalism is weaving that whole human web of what happens to people with broader decision making and ideas. And then lastly, I would say really connecting it to history. One of the big questions we always ask when someone tells you, oh, this is happening, this is fascinating. So we always ask, well, why now? What are the why now? And it's a good question to ask yourself when you're pitching any idea. Can you answer the question of why now? Why is this idea compelling now? Why is it important now? And why couldn't it have existed 5 years ago? Or maybe it did, but in a different form.
Hmm. Can you say a little bit more about, I think we'll oftentimes hear speaking truth to power, and it's definitely a phrase that's been used in journalism historically, Washington Post, others. I think it's useful for people to hear, what does that mean?
Yeah, and the slogan of the Washington Post is "Democracy dies in darkness," which is another version of that phrase. I think it is confronting those, and sometimes you're confronting those in power from with the impact of their actions in a way they might not want to recognize. You're forcing them to be accountable for it. I can give an example. One of the stories that was in our packet that won the Pulitzer for Doge was about how the Doge Bros were trying to end phone service for Social Security. So, there's 73 million older Americans that are on Social Security, and they didn't grow up in a time where they're using apps and the internet. So phone service is really important to them. So to just end it and make it digital, well, it might be a good idea to do a digital transition. I know, DJ, you worked on a lot of that stuff, and it's a good idea to do a digital transition. It wouldn't be a good idea to do it overnight just to end phone service. So we uncovered that that was a plan. We reported that that was a plan. We got to be on Rachel Maddow and other places where we got to broadcast and talk about it. And it ended up getting so much pushback in that case that they ended the plan. And that's an example of, I think in that case, the plan, it was a bad idea. Like to do that overnight would have been extremely disruptive for how people get critical
People
services.
would have gotten hurt, if not died.
Yeah, people would have, well, they wouldn't have been able to get their benefits. They wouldn't have been
Oh,
able to reach people, which we saw a lot last year. They wouldn't have been able to reach people because they wouldn't have been able to use the phone. So, um, telling the world we've uncovered this plot, here's a bad idea. It's sort of like you put it back in the face of the people who are in power. You'd want to say it to their face, this is a bad idea, and you explain why. Sometimes it's a good idea, but
mhm.
oftentimes what we're uncovering are questionable or controversial ideas, especially in my world.
Hmm. When and how does that? By the way, I just want to remind everyone, we're having our conversations in there's two places we look at. One is event chat in Discord for our general dialogue. And here, if you've got questions, post them in the Q&A portion. We're gonna definitely get to your questions. This is your chance to really kind of get the inside track on many, many things. And Lisa also got permission from the Washington Post to be here, so it's not normally a thing that you easily get access to. But the part I want to also talk about is like, something I've always admired about you is your ability to figure out what a good story is or what an interesting story looks like. And there's like a storytelling component wrapper kind of piece of this because like I think we often take it for granted because we read it and we keep reading, that means it was a good story and it kept us through that. If it wasn't, you sort of ignore it. How do you think about the storytelling component versus just reporting the facts component and that the tie-ins of that with journalism these?
That's a really interesting question because at some point when you do this for a while, it can become instinct. Like you have this nose for what's a good story. And I'm trying to now think, how did I develop that nose? Or, it's definitely the thing that you want to tell your friends at the dinner table. Like if you're sitting around with your friends going out or talking on the phone or texting or whatever, and that's the thing you want to tell them, I always say, like, if you've told something to like two people because you think it's wow, there could probably be a story there. Not if it's like a personal thing, but sometimes a personal thing, connects to a bigger phenomenon. Very often, actually, some of my best stories start with the personal. Like a couple years ago, I did a story about the rise of testing yourself at home. I don't know if any of you guys have ever taken like some of these new tests for like your microbiome or blood tests, like a function health test where you're doing a panel of all your blood markers, a thyroid test. These tests are being advertised a lot online and on Instagram, particularly to like women, in their early 40s. You get a lot of these ads. And I realized, okay, wow, it's like a couple years after COVID. I don't know if I would have been comfortable taking a home test before COVID, but then at COVID, everyone got used to it. So I did this story about how during COVID, people got used to taking all these tests at home. And now all these companies are selling all sorts of other tests online. And most of it goes through Instagram because doctors aren't really believers in these tests. Maybe they should be, but many doctors aren't. It's actually very interesting and controversial. So that came from my own experience. But my instinct was I'm getting a lot of ads about this. It's not something I've seen before, so it feels new. Yeah, one thing you want to know is if something feels new. And then you want to try, like I said, the why now connected to history. As I started thinking about it and talking to experts about it and companies, you could see that there was this shift since the pandemic. So it made me think, okay, we're living in we're living in a different world after the pandemic. And there's all these dimensions to it that I hadn't really thought about, like the comfort in home testing. Where does that take you on your health journey in the future? So I don't know if that answers your question around instinct. What was the other piece of the question, DJ? I already
Well,
forgot.
it's kind of like the art of storytelling and the notion of like what and the reason I'm asking this question, maybe let me kind of give a little more context around it, is we're entering an era where what does it mean to storytell about yourself so you can actually get that job or to get that type of be in best position? And so there's one part around storytelling about yourself. There's another part storytelling about maybe making a pitch about what you're doing. And then there's also an important component of this, which is storytelling for the purpose of journalism and and the importance of trying to move the ball forward on an issue. And how do you communicate that?
So okay, so good. So right, so probably a lot of you in the audience right now or in this group are thinking about storytelling about yourselves, which is I'm going to think for a moment about how that applies to this profession. I mean, certainly, um, my job is to tell stories about other people, but very often, sometimes, as I said, it ties into myself. And I'm actually still planning to do a piece around my own personal self testing and my own experience with it. So I will actually use it to tell a story about myself. So there's different ways. As far as packaging, yourself, if you think about it's something I'd love it if there were a student here that I could workshop with it. I bet that I bet that if anyone here gave me their pitch about themselves, I could workshop it with you because it's almost like pitching a story in a way. You're talking about your journey. You're talking about the why now, why I'm here now, and why what I have to offer is important right
Ooh.
now to
Well,
this
let's see.
moment.
Kathy, are we allowed to promote somebody in? Can we
Oh
do that?
yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. We can
So
do that.
if you're a
Yeah.
volunteer,
You can
why
raise
don't
your
you
hand. Yeah.
raise your hand or ping us and we'll figure out how to do it or put it somewhere, React or
I'll be
something.
very kind, but we can talk
Yeah.
about pitching yourself using the tools of journalism, actually, which is a lot of what we have to do. My job, oftentimes after I even write a story, is I have to pitch a story in the room. I have to pitch a story to the editors. I have to pitch a story internally. Then, if my story does well, I might talk about it on television. So we have to package our stories in different ways. It is kind of about, yeah, how do you condense a long story into a simple pitch that people can understand and walk away and say, oh, wow, that's interesting. Or, oh, wow, I want to learn more. Or I just learned something.
Right.
Here's Lane.
Awesome. Lane, I was hoping you would volunteer. You're exactly the person I wanted to volunteer. All
You know
right.
me always, oh, yeah, you know me always ready to talk.
I love it. I love it. That's because you're awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I
All
see
right,
you,
let's
Lee.
workshop it now.
Yeah. Okay. So, hi, my name is
Hey.
Lane Shimataro. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am currently a master's student doing my master's in data science through Georgia Tech. And through this program, I've been working on a project called Others Are Wondering the Same Thing. It's going to be a newsletter that people can ask questions, and I'll gather those questions and then communicate with experts in their fields to answer those scientific questions to allow others to allow people to kind of get their own questions answered about science and kind of create a community about around that.
So it's all about science.
Yeah, it's all about like scientific questions and things like that.
Oh, sorry. trying to take notes to myself and I'm realizing I'm sending it to everybody. So let me just take a note to my, don't worry, all I did was
But now
take
we all
notes.
know what your notes are.
It says others are wondering the same thing. Let me see if I can just take a note to myself. Um, okay. So it's called, first of all, I think others are wondering the same thing is a great title.
Thank you.
I'd probably foreground very quickly that it's about science. And I'd ask, because you said you're a data science PhD, and then it was like,
Master's student.
I'm sorry, master student.
Yeah.
And then you slipped in, these are science questions, but I would almost also lead with, others are wondering the same thing. Well, tell me this, why did you want to do this about science and specifically?
My undergrad was in microbiology and it was during the time of COVID. So I got a lot of questions almost every day from family members and people I knew about COVID and what they can do and things like that. And pretty much by mid-COVID, we had a group chat of just sending information back and forth. And it, for at least my family, it helped ease some of the burden. And then as I started my master's, people don't really know what I'm doing. And then um, so communicating that with them, but also I taught for a few months and fifth graders have like the best questions. They're starting to come into their own and it created the best dialogue and it really shaped how I wanted to teach and share information and created that inquisitiveness and really shaped how I wanted to teach and share information about science. So we would always start with someone's question and it was if I couldn't answer it, I'd come and answer it the next day, whatever it was. So things like that.
Um, okay, so when I'd start your pitch, and I don't know how long you have for this pitch, but I really like the idea of you starting with the COVID story. And I would just do a quick one. I would say, I was a college student during COVID, and I studied microbiology. I was a microbiology major during COVID, and no one and people kept asking me all these scientific questions, so much so that I started a group chat with my friends and family just to get valid answers to scientific questions. It made me realize that there are so many scientific questions that people don't have answers to, and then you can give a dot to, the natural question is, what we have Google, we have all these sources, so you probably want to say something like, it's still hard to get really valid, authenticated, trusted sources of scientific information because, and that's why you started that group chat. So I'd almost do, and again, we didn't really, this is just a fun workshop activity, but it's fun. We didn't really outline what the format is, but if I was pitching it, the project, I'd start very quick. I'd just do a really quick, I was a microbiology major during COVID, and I saw that there were millions of questions, scientific questions that my friends and family had, so much so that I started a group chat. And I realized there's this bigger need for still validated answers to scientific questions.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. There you have it, Lane. Lane, you want to ask your question that you asked also? Because I think this is such a great question also. And thanks for
Yeah.
having the courage to stand up
Yeah.
and do
Oh,
this.
excuse me.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Thank you.
all the dogs.
That's all
Um,
good.
I can't see it readily because I'm on the panel, but it was something of how do you stay empathetic in a world that feels as though it's losing more empathy every day or something along those lines.
Yep, that's your question. Nailed it.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, I think it's one of the hardest questions, actually, if you choose a career like journalism. Um, I don't even know how people I know who are activists right now, like our neighbor here is an immigration lawyer. I don't even know how she survived the past 2 years. Um, I think journalism, and this is, if anyone here is thinking about going to journalism, what I will say is journalism isn't activism. There are forms of journalism that are activism, and increasingly with influencers who call themselves journalists, um, they can act as activists. I'll tell you from a more, I am from like a more old school tradition, which is that my job is to tell the story, and that used to bother me earlier in my career. Now it doesn't, because I actually see that there are so few forums where people try not to take a side in the world that we live in, that actually finding out all the information, laying it out in a measured argument, hearing from the different sides and letting the readers make their own decision, that's still a powerful tool I believe in. I used to be, I think that when I was younger in my 20s, because I always wanted to be a journalist. So I started at the Village Voice in my 20s. And the Village Voice was a paper in New York City that had been around since the 50s.
Forever. It's like iconic.
Forever. Yeah. It has a storied history, and it was a launching ground for writers. And my job was to basically be a magazine writer, because this was right before the internet. I started out, my job was to do a 4,000 word cover story at the Village Voice, which was this free newspaper that was on every street corner in New York. So when I did it, really a lot of people in my own city read it. And I remember I had felt I did a lot of stories that I was drawn to because they broke my heart in a certain way. I remember there was a story that I did about um, young people who were born with HIV. So they were born with AIDS or with HIV positive because in some cases AIDS, because their parents had it, but they were from a generation where it was right before there were retroviral drugs. So they were born with the disease. Their parents died, and there was a whole generation of them. They were left in hospitals across New York City where the parents died because there were no treatments, and then the kids ended up living in some cases because the treatments came out right around when they were born. So it was this thing where they were these orphans from, and I wanted to tell the story of, no, don't ask me why, because I wouldn't do it today. I wanted to tell the story of what happened to that generation of young people who were the first. I mean, growing up HIV positive in a time when people didn't really even know what that was. You had it your whole life, and now you're trying to make a life. And I ended up finding a couple young people from that generation who are still living and making lives. There's one guy I'm still in touch with today. That story, it just broke my heart because people had extremely tragic lives, even though I was like in awe of the adversity that they overcame just to work and live. Um, and so today I think I do more about business and power, and it does touch on people who get hurt. But I just noticed that for myself, my mom was a therapist, and I noticed that if I got too close to certain topics, it was too heartbreaking for me because I just wanted to help people. I didn't want to be the journalist. I wanted to help. And so um, now maybe I choose different topics that where I don't feel as much of a conflict as I did then. Or yeah, I don't pursue the kind of stories today that I did at the Village Voice. And I mean, I did stories about, you know, the head of the, I remember it was a children actually who there was a family of three in Staten Island, New York, and the brother became schizophrenic and actually murdered the parents. And I did the story of the two surviving siblings who had never spoken to the media. I somehow convinced them to tell their story of what that was like to have your sibling murder your parents. By the way, it's the same thing that happened to Rob Reiner, the Hollywood director. And I actually was thinking I want to somehow connect the surviving kids of Rob Reiner, to these kids that I knew who are adults now and went through the whole thing. Anyway, these kinds of stories, they were really well read in New York. And I think I got a lot of recognition for it in New York in my early days, but they also really broke my heart. So yeah, I have a very high empathy. So in a way I have to control it by doing different topics sometimes.
Mhm. How do it brings up a question of how do you build trust so quickly with people?
I think there's so many different ways to build trust. I think it depends on who you're talking to. If it's a situation like what I explained with those young people many years ago, I think you have to go to people and say, just very open, here's why I was touched by your story. Here's why I heard what happened to you. Here's why I was touched, and here's why I wanted to tell your story. That would be a case where you just want to be really open with it. And maybe people will, maybe people won't trust you. You can't control the outcome. I've had so many times where I've done that and people aren't ready to talk. So you have to strike people at the right moment.
Mhm.
I think with other types of sources where they might have secretive information or information about um, maybe a company or a government program or a boss, there one thing that I think I always found with reporting in tech is that people, and especially in the tech world, they sign documents called NDAs that they can't say, they think that those NDAs mean they can't say anything at all about their companies. But then sometimes the very same people who sign NDAs are going on LinkedIn saying, I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that. And then you'll call them up as a journalist and you'll say, hey, I want to talk to you about it. And they'll say, I don't know what I can say because I signed an NDA. And I'm like, well, just you can say what's in your LinkedIn post. So sometimes I'll have a conversation with people. I'll say, well, I'll say to them, you could say to me, tell me, we might start the relationship with, talk to me about what you would feel comfortable saying at a public forum. Let's say you were asked to talk about your job at a conference. We don't need to go beyond that. That's one way. And then sometimes that builds the relationship and then people feel comfortable telling you other things over time. Another way might be, I never give legal advice. You're not supposed to give legal advice, though I actually have a lot of thoughts about how NDAs are enforced because I've seen it. But one thing I did find in the world of tech, and might be a tactic to get people open up in general, if you ask people, what secretive thing did you work on in the bowels of this company? Well, they'll say, well, I'm absolutely not allowed to tell you the secretive thing I worked on in the bowels of government or the company. But ask them, and this comes from my mom being a therapist, ask them about the people they worked with, ask them about their bosses, ask them about the organization and the management. And I can promise you that if you learn about the people, you will learn about the work because people, they don't often want to talk about the job, but they want to talk about their boss. And so you learn about the work. And that's how I got tons of scoops over the years about Facebook, Twitter, other companies.
Oh, that's so interesting. My go-to is tell me something you're proud of that you worked on.
That's a great
And
one
then
too.
people tell you like amazing stuff and you're like, wow, that was a lot of details.
That's amazing. That's a great one. And I do that too. I should do that more. That's great.
Well, you think about this amazing cohort of people we have in this program, and many of them are thinking about a career in journalism. What's your advice to people to think about journalism these days? Is it still like we're seeing in tech or other fields where you don't have to kind of go the traditional route? Some people who go into medicine have never taken they're a literature major. They're something else completely different than they go to med school. What is the path these days for journalism, and what's the advice you would give this next generation as they want to think about going into this concept, like whether we call it journalism or something else, this concept of holding truth to power, telling stories on behalf of people, and really helping shine a light on the darkness?
Well, firstly, I'll say, how many, can you remind me how many people are in the program, this cohort?
2,500.
2,500. And have any of them expressed, I know many of them are computer science majors. Have any of them expressed interest in the humanities? And
Oh yeah, we
yeah,
got we
many.
got plenty of people who are doing investigative journalism projects and other kind of totally orthogonal ideas, and it's actually why we wanted to have you here.
Amazing, amazing. And I'm happy to also mentor if anyone wants to come on a specific idea and talk to me about it. I'm totally happy to do that
Oh, there's
as
your
well,
Q
one on
team.
one. I'm
Let
happy
us
to.
know if let us know in an event chat, or let us know and we'll figure out how to collate and figure out how to make that work.
Sure. Yes. Happy to talk to anyone about the projects they're working on or investigative journalism. Um, the advice that I would give to anyone starting journalism or thinking about starting journalism or thinking about even creating a journalistic component to the job they're doing. First, I'll say to the people starting journalism or thinking about it, there's no there's never been a time of greater need for people who to know about what's going on in their world, in their government, in their society. I mean, the why now is the moment is very urgent. I mean, we're in the midst of several wars. We are facing climate change and many existential threats to ways of life. There's massive inequality in this country. And the people who run things, are increasingly divorced from the realities of how people are living. So your own life and what you see on the street and what you see in your world is a massive resource, can be a massive resource for society, and you can take it another level. So I would say, like, it's simple, but um, let me see. So what I'd say is, yes, there's a really great immense need for journalism today. And then the question I think right now is, well, what format will that be told? I work for a traditional newspaper that's been around for 150 years. And I hope that the Washington Post will be around in another 100 years in some format. I do. What's crazy is that today the Washington Post is not that dissimilar from what it was 150 years ago on some level. I mean, it's still a newspaper. We read it online or in an app, but it's still fundamentally a newsroom of people writing stories about different topics. Um, you all know that podcasting is massive. We've invested in podcasting. We've divested in podcasting. I've seen a lot of missed calls at the Post and other places around podcasting, but I think we should get really into it because the power of the conversation is so strong. And it's a way to utilize your talent. I think that there's the path of the online influencer. There's the path of the Substacker. I have colleagues who have left and have gone and started Substacks. They're journalists and they want to report on things independently. They don't want the overhead of a newsroom. They don't feel that they need it because they're like a one-woman show, one-man show, one-person show, and they can do the reporting on their own and people will pay them directly for their content. So there are so many different paths now for how you could become a journalist. There are colleagues of mine who we've had over the years many different kind of YouTube shows and video shows. One of our most popular creators or talents on that video side, he left the Post not that long ago and is also starting his own thing. It's not a Substack, it's a video news program that he's starting himself. And people have often asked me, would I ever go do that? And I might. I'm definitely open to it. One of the things that those people have sometimes is a really specific interest in a topic. So Lainey, you spoke about Lainey, is her name? Lainey just
Lane.
spoke about like her fascination with microbiology. So like that's the kind of thing that is ideal to start a Substack. You could say, I'm obsessed with microbiology and I have a way of talking about microbiology to audiences that know nothing about microbiology. Okay. And I can make that really, really interesting. Well, that could be a form of journalism that you could do once a month or once a week to practice writing. Anyone, by the way, here can do that. If you have a topic you're very interested in, that you're passionate about, what I would say, especially as a way to explore whether you enjoy writing, whether you enjoy this kind of communications path, is give yourself once a month, say, I'm going to just write about the topic that I'm working on. I guess you're all doing projects through Hack Your Summer anyway. And there's a component in the projects where you're writing about and communicating about what you're doing? I'm sure already.
You got to communicate it, and we leave it open ended on. You got to show your work in this day and age, as we believe.
Yeah. So are they going to be like people can do a podcast about it, or they could do like a video
Podcast,
series
right?
about it?
You could do whatever you want. Like basically, to your point, it's the world is in a transition. And it's like, how do you flip the script from people coming to you, you trying to go to them, to people coming to you to see what you can offer?
Right. So I think so. It's great. Everyone in Hack Their Summer is already on the path to this because you're already doing these projects, and then you already have a component where you're saying, okay, I have to make people come to me and talk about it as if I were publishing a story and I were a publication about a certain topic. Maybe you're writing about it. Maybe you're doing a little video short about it. Maybe you're doing a podcast conversation about it. But I think those are great ways. If you're thinking about going to journalism, I think those are great exercises to do because you see, how does it feel when I try to retell the story of the thing I was passionate about in some other format? that's going to make it accessible to people. How does that feel for me as an exercise? Do I enjoy doing this? Do I enjoy telling that story? Do I get a high when I get the response? How do you feel? That's another thing. Like, there's a lot of components to journalism is like, how do you feel when you're doing the work? And one of my mentors and friends always talks about the high in your work. Do you feel the high in your work? And also, how do you feel about the response? So, do you like it when people write back and ask this question or that question? Do you really want people to know? Like, how are you passionate about wanting people to know about this? And I think if those answers are yes, then that can start you on the path of journalism. I would still suggest for anyone's interested in journalism to intern at a news organization. The Washington Post has internships still. New York Times has a big internship program. I think still working in traditional media, and obviously I'm biased, but I don't think that we should forgo the values of traditional media and like, the 150 to 200-year profession that has been created with a set of standards and values and norms and ambitions. What I love about a newsroom, and what I'll say is why I haven't done the solo creator path, is because I actually really love the energy and vibration of a newsroom. I love working with editors because an editor is an amazing thought partner when you have a good one. A bad one just tries to be controlling and is like a timekeeper. But good editors are like the best thought partners, and they can elevate your ideas. They can help you get to what you want to say, but you haven't fully articulated it yet. I think everyone can use a great editor. So I would say, you could explore the feeling of doing the work, and then also explore what are the publications that you like to read. I don't know I don't know what the media diet. I'd love to know what the media diet of all 2,000 people in this program is. Is it Substack? Is it podcast? Is it YouTube? Is it legacy media, like, which I would encourage everyone here to just subscribe to the Washington Post. It's free. The newsletters are free. And I can probably get anyone interested a gift subscription too, because I have a bunch. So reach out to me if you're interested. I would say, how do you get your information? And that's another thing. Do you find yourself very avidly seeking information through the information ecosystem? And do you then want to be one of these people who's part of that ecosystem of storytellers and of information tellers?
Let me just comment on a couple of things. First, if you can, you should definitely be a subscriber to WashPo. Not just I am.
Thanks, CJ.
And I've been for multiple decades, and it's just a great, like, I fully endorse subscribing to as much as you can. The other one I want to mention real quick is, Lisa, you brought this up about interning at a traditional media organization. I know this has come up in other places. People are like, hey, if those places don't have slots, you didn't get one, what could you do? There's all these journalists that have gone on to do Substacks or other things. Maybe just email them out of the blue because they're a team of one right now, and they could sure use a team of 2 or 5. And who knows? That's how you get build up with these. These are phenomenal journalists out there doing this. So go do that. And then the other one, Lisa, something I've always admired about you is you have an incredibly thick skin, because I see the comments that people are posting. We see what's happening on X. And Alex, I'm going to get to some of your questions about this in just a second also. Is how do you stay sane in this, like, with the onslaught coming back at you on these things? And how do you develop a thick skin? And what can we learn from you about that as we go through our processes of getting knocked down and then having to get back up?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a big one. By the way, yes, definitely co-sign. Write to your Substackers if you like Substack and you can't get an organization, you can't get an internship in a newsroom, or you haven't yet. Yeah, write to those people. DJ is absolutely right. They're a team of one. They might need help. And also, you have to remember too, these people, especially when they're doing Substacks, the name of the game is content. And if you can say, hey, I'm into this topic, could I maybe write one newsletter for you a month and you edited it, so I get the skill set of you editing my work? And you obviously, they publish it under your name. Make sure no one should ever take credit for your work. But then that gives them the chance to have more content, like through guest posts. That could be something that would be very appealing for a lot of journalists right now who are figuring out how to be solo operators. As far as thick skin, that's another thing for any advice of anyone getting journalism. If you're trying to do the kind of journalism I'm doing, which is really going at the center of some of the hardest stories in our society and the most powerful people in our society, you do have to have a thick skin. You have to, that's why I go back to when I said, do you value the work? Do you get the high in your work? Because there are going to be times when there's going to be a lot of haters. You also have to know that your people who you really like, you may write about them and they may not like what you write about them. You can lose relationships. I try not to, but you can lose relationships. I probably spend a lot more time obsessing over that than other people, because, yeah, some of the journalists just do it in different ways. That's probably a side conversation, but I think a lot about how to preserve my relationships. And I'm very proud of the fact that even people I've written critical articles about, most of the time, I still maintain a relationship with them. And that's very hard. There was this one example of like, okay, here's an example. During the pandemic, I went down to Southern California to do a story about an anti-vaccine protest. The bigger story was about how Southern California had become this real hotbed of anti-vaccine activity, conversation. And it was kind of about how, because I covered social media at the time, it was about how after the insurrection, January 6th, the social media companies basically clamped down on all these groups that they censored all these groups that they felt might have led to the insurrection, including a lot of groups that did anti-vaccine, that were skeptical of vaccines. And then you saw a lot of the momentum kind of stay in Southern California. I'm not pitching the story very well because it was a couple of years ago, and it's been a lifetime since of news. But I went down to this protest in Santa Ana, in the capital of, it was the county seat, and it was like an anti-vaccine protest, and there was a guy and I was the only person wearing a mask there, so I was very visible. And I was just recording this guy who spoke, and it was a local sheriff who, by the way, he later actually was jailed for his role in the insurrection. This was a few months after, so no one had really been prosecuted yet. But this guy ended up went to prison for this, but he goes, and now he's out. He was pardoned. He goes on stage and he says, and some of the people who were in the audience from the Washington Post and CNN, there was no one from CNN in the audience. It was just me. He goes, from the Washington Post, well, they're the devil. And he starts going on and on about how the media is the devil. And he's like, these are not just words. Words really matter. I mean, they're sitting there. These are people who, some of them are in militias. You can tell that they're in local militias. They're armed. And they're literally like glowering at me like I am the devil. And I'm the only one wearing a mask. So I felt totally hated, and they're crowding around me. So afterwards, I went up to that guy and I said to him, to the speaker, and I said, I think what you said up there, I want to interview and I want to talk to you, but I want to tell you what you said was really irresponsible. People that can be, I said, you have to understand the consequences of that. And I'm the kind of person who will just say it to a person's face. Many people won't. He ended up giving me his number. We talked a lot. I ended up writing about him in the future. So you have to have this thick skin of like, I'm like, there's a part of me that like hates the person because they did that and they're putting me in danger. And then there's a part of me that's curious about who is this person and the power they have. So it's like the writer versus the human. After that happened, I got creepy messages from a lot of people, or a number of people. And it was right at the time when we were buying a new house. So we ended up putting our home in an LLC. I went through a whole security training around this, where you will be very hard pressed. I'm not saying you should try, but you'd be very hard pressed to find my name associated with any address that I currently live. Like, I have taken multiple steps, multiple classes to hide my online footprint, so that, because I have a colleague I have multiple colleagues that people came to their doors, people came to their houses. I had a stalker who showed up when I was at the Wall Street Journal. I had this stalker guy who showed up, who was obsessed with my articles. He showed up. The only reason he didn't get up there is because there was a security guard who thought he was weird. Had it been a building without a security guard, he would have been right up there. So there are things that happen. People become obsessed with you. People become obsessed with the topic. You get a lot of hate. It's like I wrote about Elon Musk. Elon Musk has real fanboys. If you say negative things about Elon Musk, or if you say critical things about Elon Musk that are true, and Elon Musk decides to post your story, which he did, and attack the story, which he had done to me, well, then I will get a week of the most horrible hate, like, you ugly Jewish rat, you should get cancer and die. Where do you live? Like, I've gotten many messages like that. So you have to really develop that. You send it to the security. This is another reason why I think it's hard to be a Substack journalist sometime and do the kind of work I do, because we have security at the Post. Anyway, I'm probably going on and on about it, but it's definitely something that's affected my life and the life of people I know. And also, we didn't even talk about, like, the FBI also raided my colleague through the Trump administration. So there's more attacks, pressure on journalists now than ever from the government too.
And the courage that you and your colleagues have done or has shown is extraordinary in these times. The part I just want to emphasize to everybody is that it may sound like this is just journalism. If you're, I think we're entering a phase of the world where if you're doing anything notable, you're going to get attacked.
Yeah.
And even if you're trying to build a small thing that you think is a side project, it's very easy to hate. It's very hard to build. And we're living in that world. So don't think of this as just, oh, only journalists have to worry about it. But it also tells you something else that we've talked about here in the program, which is why the network is so powerful, because the network has to come together to aid, and we have to look out for each other. Part of that is we watch each other's back as we're trying to do hard things collectively, whether that's in journalism, building a project, doing doing an art thing, installation, all of it matters. Lisa, I want to get to some of these questions because they're so good. Alex has also brought up, which is, I'm just going to read Alex's question here. Journalism is in the middle of a watershed moment. Twitter is the #1 news app on the App Store, and local print publications are folding across the country. As somebody who's at the center of tech world, what's causing most of these changes? And a journalist, where do you see journalism going? I'm just going to keep it contained to that because that is a that is a book in itself. And so maybe just take a couple minutes and talk through that.
Okay, so I'll try to keep, it's 12:19 Pacific. I'll try to keep my answer to 2 minutes.
2 minutes. I know this is a hard one to talk about.
This is a hard one.
Maybe here's the angle to take it through. We know that the world is in a watershed moment. What's the advice you give people to navigate the rapids for their career about where things are going to go?
Oh, wow. Okay. So different from journalism, just where.
Yeah, but I think it's through the lens of journalism. If you or somebody is interested in this field and they're saying, wow, this world is rapidly changing, how do I position myself to be best able to do the work like you're able to do in the future?
Well, did you know Kaiser Yunus? He runs Applied Intuition. So he's a startup founder. He's a guy I've known for a very long time out here, about as long as I've known you, DJ, and met him in the beginning of my time out here. Have a lot of respect for him. He recently gave the commencement at his, and he sent it to me and asked me what I thought. And one thing he said in this commencement that I took from, which was that you are in a position where you will probably never be able to take as much risk as at any other time in your career as now. So you should do the thing that if it feels really risky and exciting, now is the time to do it. Because once you have a family and kids and a house, it's a million times harder. The whole other topic. And so even though right now journalism is under a lot of pressure, I don't know how many jobs like mine are going to exist in 10 or 20 years. There's also this flourishing of the art of storytelling, as we discussed, through other mediums and other ways. This industry is really in flux. There's no major sources of authority anymore. And so what I would say is if you're interested in this field, still try to learn from the big institutions. We still are the Washington Post. We still have a huge audience, even with all the Substacks out there. We haven't figured out how to capitalize on that yet. But and study the industry that you're in. So you may really like the work that you're doing, but every work that you're doing is also in the context of the industry, and become a student of the industry as well. Because you may start getting ideas on the business side of what you're doing. So I would say, like, and then look where and this is something Kazar said again, and I really loved his talk. He also did say, true, try to go where the puck is going, in the sense of try to move your career to where the inflection points are that are interesting, where the tectonic plates are shifting. I was lucky to come out to tech at a time when the tectonic plates are shifting. I can tell you there's many, many jobs for tech journalists out there because people want to know about AI and all this stuff. So if you're passionate about that stuff and it interests you, then go to where the topic is. And I guess that's 3 minutes, so I'll stop.
Yeah, I love that, because the best advice I ever got was chaos is where what provides opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I think it's actually one of the greatest times in upheaval. Means you all, the people here, you all are in the prime to take risk. If you fail, and you fail in journalism, everyone expected you to fail. So why not swing for the fences and do something remarkable and help a lot of people along the way? That seems like an incredible opportunity to do. Um, I
Yeah,
want to go to
can I
this
say one thing on
question.
that? If you try a Substack now and it fails, you still did a Substack and it was interesting and you learned from it. If I try to Substack now, I have to support my 2 kids. I have to figure out how I can make the same salary I make at the Post. I'm sure it's doable, but the level of hurdle to get there is so much higher.
Totally, totally. And nothing interesting happens if you play it safe in life, I feel like. As you and I both know too well. I hope I'm saying your name right, Opama. Uh, and if I'm not, please correct this spell, how I should pronounce it to me. I'm going to take this portion of yours. We talked a little bit about the credibility and the trust needed, but you also asked a follow-on question, which is, could you share your approach to finding stories and identifying important problems? And then really, how do you get those people to build that trust when they might be unwilling to talk?
Well, we talked about trust, so maybe I'll pause on that one. As far as the story finding process, so I used to be crazy. Like every Uber driver I would talk to, I'd felt like I had a story. Like I just had this endless appetite for like any person I would talk to. It was almost my personal challenge of like, every person I talked to is like a font of life experience, and their experience is connecting to like some societal problem. So what can I learn from everyone I talk to that might become a story? I think it was an unconscious challenge I had my whole life. I've only now more recently not done it as much because I'm also a mom of little kids and I have a certain amount of bandwidth. I
The
can't
kids
get
are
a
giving
story
you crap in the car.
right. I'm like, I can't then just turn it on and get a lot more. So I would say, how do you find stories? Well, again, maybe this is one we could workshop if we have time now. If
Oh, I
anyone
think we only got 6 minutes. So
we
we'll
only got
probably,
6 minutes. Okay, because
yeah,
this is one where what I would want to do is have one of you come up
yeah.
and who's interested in journalism, and we could workshop what you're interested in, and we could get from what you're interested in to what the actual story is and how you'd pitch that story and how you would think about it as a story. Because
Mhm.
this is a question of how do you go from what's interesting to what's a story.
Mhm. The part that I also want to make sure to connect the dots to for everybody is something we've talked about, is the importance of really just talking to people, sharing and bouncing ideas off of people. Even Hack Your Summer kind of came out from a similar same way, just listening to people and developing the art of listening. In fact, Lisa's comments, many times she's told me a story about an Uber driver, and I've gone, wow, I didn't know that's where people were thinking or how the world was going. And so it's something that we've encouraged all of you to really hone in on as you go through this exercise. Deepthi has a question, which is, if you have a rather niche topic that you're writing about, what's your advice on making someone outside your expected readership to get interested in it? Or does it make more sense to focus only on your expected audience?
That's a great question. It actually goes back to, I know I mentioned Kazar's commencement speech where he said, go, follow where the puck is moving and where the tectonic plates are shifting. What I'll say is also the puck is where you're passionate about.
Mm.
Because the whole world is going through disruption in almost every corner. Don't just go to tech because it's sexy and you think it's where the puck is going. If you're not passionate about it, like, you know, go to, if you're, we talked about a social security phone call. If you have spent too much time on the phone with a credit card company and you think that's fucked up, like how you have to go through like 100 automated customer service people to talk to a human being, and you're passionate about that being wrong, investigate that, you know, investigate the way the world works. It could be, I think a lot about like terms like procedural justice or like administrative justice. Like I'm also very interested in like, why is it so hard to talk to a real person on the phone anymore? You know, um, kind of like the micro day-to-day experience of people, to me is just as interesting as the big names that everyone wants to read about or the AI. Like sometimes there's a massive story in just the micro experience. As far as your question about a topic you're passionate about, how do you make it interesting to others? Again, this is one where I'd love to workshop with you because it's fun in practice. If you told me you were interested in microbiology, I'd ask you to give me your 3 most interesting topics in microbiology. I'd ask you to tell me, why do you think those topics are interesting to people who aren't interested in microbiology? And then we could workshop why. I mean, if it's microbiology, I would say, well, a lot of people right now are interested in gut health and the microbiome. So can we tie what you're looking at to something in the microbiome? One thing you can look at too is, I don't know what your topic is, but you could see what's been written about recently in the news about that topic. I'm sure you've done a good, what we call a clip search. What's been done about that topic recently? That will give you a sense of where the puck is on that topic. So that might say, okay, well, I've seen 5 things written about this, but I haven't seen this one thing said yet. Well, then maybe that's your story. It's the one thing that hasn't been said.
Mm-hmm. It, Man, I have so many questions in 2 minutes. Lisa, maybe the one that I'll end on here is, when you were back in college and sort of trying to figure it out, what's the advice that you found that stuck the most for you and you kept going back to as kind of a touchstone for you?
Um, I can give little sort of pithy things people have said to me over the years that actually helped. I can put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Um,
Or you just tell them and we'll transcribe it.
Okay. So actually, I wanted to do a post about this a couple of years ago, which was like thanking all the mentors and all the people who have kind of said a little, just like one thing along the way that stuck. Rebecca Blumenstein, she's now the head of news at NBC. She once said she was managing editor at the Wall Street Journal when I was there, and she would say, at the beginning of the year, write the 3 biggest stories that you want to tell on a post-it note. And by the way, this could be if you're in data scientist, write the 3 biggest quests that you would like to achieve on a post-it note, and put it physically. And I mean, I know we could do it on our phones now, but don't put it like physically on your computer where you can see it. And gauge yourself by
I have mine.
there you go. Right. And as 6 months go by and a year go by, did I do those 3 things? Because it's easy to get into side quests. It's easy to get sidetracked. And those 3 things can change, but did I do those 3 things? Like, keep your eye on the prize. Really, and the prize can change. Once someone said to me, find your rabbis. I think it's a good one in journalism. Like a rabbi, it's like, a wise spiritual teacher. But in journalism, the person was saying to me, like, find the people. If you don't understand a topic, find the people. GJ's been one of my rabbis. Find the people who understand the topic and talk to them about it, and find as many as you can. So that sounds obvious, but like, build relationships with the right experts for whatever you're going for, and ask them the questions and learn from them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will. I'm sure there's a lot of other advice I would give, or little. There's a lot of others that have been said to me over the years, but the post-it note and the find your rabbis did always stuck with me.
Lisa, just to close us out here, I know we're a little bit over. Um, what's your hope for this generation and this group that is excited to listen to you and think about this career in journalism?
Oh, that's a big question. I think, we're all counting on you. You know, yeah, and I'd say my biggest, I don't know if it's a hope, but I will say to everyone here, my generation, DJ's generation, we're counting on you now. We've created a world, and we've stepped into a world where there's a lot of problems, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of hard to comprehend, the state of the world right now. I would say identify what matters to you and what you value, if it's friendship, if it's community or whatever, and look and learn about how is the world around you eroding that value? How is the world sustaining that value and how is the world eroding that value? And what can you do in your own life to try to move towards more of what you value and sustain what you value? And we're counting on you because this world is really disrupted and there's really a lot of problems. And what I read about what your generation is going through, I feel scared, like for you, like when I hear about things like how hard it is to get a job now and how hard it is to get into school now. And I think I had it hard, and now it's even harder. So I commend everyone here for being the fighter that you will have to be to make it in your time, and to stay close to what you value because values are universal, and pass through time.
This is awesome. Lisa, and team, I hope you get a sense of why I'm such a Lisa super fan. And please show her some love on the reactions because I mean she's not only just amazing wealth of knowledge, and a true I mean, she's the top of her game in craft, but also just a phenomenal human and holding up the beacon of light for us all. So, Lisa, thank you for being here and sharing some of your wisdom with the cohort. I really appreciate you and gratitude for all that you do.
Back at you. Thanks, everybody. I wish that I could see all your faces, but I loved having the chance to share. And I'm pleased you reach out if you want to do any workshopping. GJ, feel free to
Yeah, we're
connect
gonna
me.
we're gonna figure out how to do that, and we just posted Kaser's commencement speech too, and so that's in the event channel if you guys want to check it out. And we're gonna post about that. Stephanie, could I ask you to take point on? I think you already did ask point on this in there, but we'll figure out how to kind of ring fence that and help make something cool happen there.
That's
Awesome.
awesome.
Thank you
All
all.
right. Thanks
And
again.
see you on the Discord channel. We know we got a ton coming up. Got another great session tomorrow with Leonard and we got tons more coming up. So stay tuned and stay posted in the event channel. All right. Thank you, Lisa. More soon.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.